Hey guys, what is up? My name is Megan. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. I hope you guys are doing well and staying safe, and welcome to today's video, which is going to be a cozy, very casual one where we talk about Ember Sparks and the Thunder of Dragons by Abi Elphinstone. This is going to be kind of like a book discussion, book review, all spoiler free of course, if you haven't read the book yet and you just want my honest thoughts on this. So that's all the introduction we need. Let's hop on into my thoughts, what this is about. Do I think you should read it? So instead of like holding up the book the entire time, let me just plop you a little picture here and let's discuss. So Ember Spark and the Thunder of Dragons is the first book in a middle grade series. I had no clue actually that this was going to be a series that like book 2 was also out this year, and it's actually out at the end of October, so by the time you see this book, the second book in the series will already be out. I will say this is a middle grade book that reads a little bit younger than some of the middle grade I am used to. For example, if you compare Skandar, Nevermore, Amari, those kinds of books to Ember Spark, you will find that Ember Sparks is a little bit younger, but I do believe that the main character also is younger. I believe she's like 10 years old instead of 13, and I do think that that is impacting the book in the way that this is made for a little bit of a younger middle grade reader. That being said, it did not at all impact my enjoyment of the book, and I ended up giving it a 4.25 on 5 stars. And I will say I read this book but listened to the audiobook as well, which is available on BookBeat, and I freaking adored the audiobook. I thought it added a lot of whimsy. So the story of Ember Sparks and the Thunder of Dragons is essentially a story about Ember, who is very much feeling lost. Basically, Ember's father has kind of walked off of her family, and since then she has been protecting herself by not making any friends, not being in contact with anyone, because she rathers being lonely than being left. And she's still dealing with all of the loss that is like your parent walking out on you and forming another family. And so she's very much isolated, and the book starts when she's on the beach and she notices this kind of like hamster who is about to be captured by this weird fisherman who she can't see his face, and she senses that things are wrong. And Ember has always kind of had a knack with animals, and she's like, I need to save this hamster. And that launches us into an incredible adventure, because essentially Ember becomes an apprentice to a magical vet. So she doesn't know magical animals are real, she doesn't know anything, but saving this hamster kind of puts these things into action, and she ends up, along with one of her classmates who becomes a friend obviously, becoming a vet to magical beasts. And the way it's done and the way that we are introduced to these beasts is incredible. The whimsy of this book is off the charts, and I felt myself smiling the entire time because it was a beautiful story. Obviously it's a like fantasy story where we actually go on an adventure and help treat and save animals. So if you yourself or have children who really love animals, this can definitely speak to them. And I, for one, am all things animals. I love my pets. I just love the idea of taking care of animals, and it's something that's very important to me, and I love how it was represented in this book. The pacing of this book is very fast. This book is like 260 pages long, so it's a very short book. The audiobook is like 4 hours, and it's just like one thing happens after the other, but it never felt rushed. Like I felt like I could understand what we were being told, I could see it, and then we would move on to something else. And I do think that it's a story of creatures, but it's also a story about becoming yourself and finding yourself after trauma. I feel like Ember obviously has a lot to cope with the loss of her dad. Like, he's not dead, but she's still grieving her dad, and her like closing herself away and then having no choice but to open herself up again because she's not working alone and saving these animals. It really was a beautiful thing to see, and I think a lot of lessons were learned throughout this book when it comes to coping after loss and who you can rely on and just the natural like protection factors of wanting to close yourself in, but needing people to survive and needing people to go on these great adventures, and that you cannot do all the things by yourself. And I think that this book is really a lesson wrapped up in an adventure, and it felt very cozy. I think the stakes were high enough that like I was engaged throughout, but it's not as dark as a lot of other middle grade books that I have read. It is definitely lighter in its tone, though it handles dark topics. I think that the creatures we are like presented to in the story really make the story as well. I really loved seeing all of the wonderful animals and just like where the story is going, and I really loved how the story kind of closes. There's no cliffhanger per se, but I personally went and ordered the second book straight away because I was like, I need to see where everything is going to go, because it's not completely resolved. Like there's definitely space for more, but again, it's a satisfying ending. So I did really love the plot. I loved the writing style, as I mentioned. I like the pacing. I have no issues with any of that. I also really love the characters. I loved Ember herself. She feels like a very like true to the middle grade audience character. She is younger. She is dealing with things as a child would, and her thought process and her acting out makes sense. She is not a perfect character. And you can see that in the way that she treats this other person who is an apprentice with her, because sometimes she over pushes the limits of the other person. Sometimes she talks rashly and she doesn't realize that she's actually being harmful. Or when she does realize, she's like, well, it's justified because I don't want friends. Like, you can't be my friend, because if you're my friend, you're gonna hurt me. And so it's all this process of Ember growing as a character and growing to understand that you need friends. And the other main character was also very patient because they went through a lot of things. They have been moving around. Like, it's a child who's moved around several times. They are being bullied. But by the end, they also learn to take their place and learn that they are capable of great things. And so it's like we're following a main character, but even the side characters demonstrate such growth that I thought it was like the best part of the story. I will say there are illustrations in here as well that are absolutely beautiful, and it really just captures the essence of the animals. And overall, I think that this story is a blend of learning about yourself, about adventure, and it's just a comfort read all in all. The reason I did take off 0.75 is not like there's anything wrong with the book. It's just not an all-time favorite. Would I recommend this book? Absolutely. If you like fantasy, if you like magical creatures, like, go for it. I think, like, if you liked the unicorn aspect of Skandar and the unicorn rider, you should read this book. If you liked, like, the whimsy and the magic in middle grade books, you should read it. If you like things that are faster paced, this is a book for you. And sure, it might not revolutionize middle grade, but I think it does its own thing, and it's actually really cool. And I haven't read a book like this ever. Again, not a favorite because it reads a little bit more young, and that is no fault to the book. I am a grown woman reading middle grade books. And I also think it was a little bit shorter. We don't deep dive into the world as much. Like, we learn the essentials for the magic system to make sense, but we don't go into it more than that. And it's obviously something I really love in middle grades, when we can push the magic systems just a tiny bit more. And I think like Nevermore is an example of that, where it's like middle grade, but the system and the things in place are obviously more developed because the books are not 260 pages long. They are longer books. They are targeted towards older children. And so that is a distinction to be made. This is really made for more entry-level middle grade, but nonetheless it is a grand old time. So I would highly recommend this, and I think it really is a different middle grade book. And maybe there are a lot out there, but I personally in my reading journey had never read anything like Ember Sparks before. So I was really gripped, and again, like, the next book is coming to me like tomorrow. I'm incredibly excited to continue with this series, and the audiobooks are fantastic. I have no real complaints other than that it felt a little bit more young, but like, that's fine. We need middle grade books for all ages and all types, and this is a great, and I hate to use this word, but like palate cleanser between books if you want something lighter but that's still action-packed and fun and will teach you a lesson. So overall, I highly recommend this book. I had a really fun time and will be continuing the series. So I hope this is helpful, a little bit insightful. I just wanted to talk about this book briefly because, again, it's not a super long book that I can like just blurt out a bunch of things about it, and I don't want it to be spoiler filled, but just know it's a magical vet apprentice situation. We see a lot of beasts, we go on an adventure, there's some bad people, some evil in there, and it's just a grand old time, but it's not spooky, it's not overly dark. I know some of you guys sometimes message me and are like, I want books for my children, but I don't want it to be like too into like good versus evil or those kinds of things. I definitely think this fits the bill. It's a very proper, straightforward middle grade. So, with all that being said, let me know in the comments down below if you think you're going to pick this book up, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye guys, happy reading!